welcome to the class, Bible study class at Bull Run Unitarian Universalist. We are recording for people who couldn't make it today, or for people who just want to go back, couldn't get enough of me, and see what there was to see. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask them at the moment they occur to you, because I might or might not get to that, and if I don't get to that, you will regret not asking the question. So I like a lively audience. So this is, how many weeks have we been doing this, Kathy?
This is our third.
Third.
Yeah.
Okay, only the third. All right.
And for us,
Oh, come again. Is it every week?
Every month, first Sunday of every month, 9 o'clock. So yeah, I appreciate that. Hopefully that keep people's interest, and I'm always open to suggestions for topics. I do, at Charlie's suggestion, reserve the right to pick a topic that's interesting to me, because that's the only way to make it entertaining and interesting. Come on in, you got room.
Thank you.
Got a seat over here.
So you started at 4? Okay, sorry, I'm late.
No worries, no worries. It does not count against your grade. If you want to close the curtain, feel free. I think we've got plenty of light. I'm recording this for posterity's sake. So today's topic is who is Satan? And the ad for this class talked about different names the deceiver is known under. But I'm also going to ask you to think about maybe these are all different characters that were written at different times, in different contexts, for different purposes, by different people. And that they're not all the same character, and that the explanation that these are all different names of the same character is a later theological decision made by the church for the church's own purposes, so that the church could do what churches do, which is control people. Except our church. Our church is well
Mark,
within control.
it's extremely loud in here.
Yeah.
And I think it's had air conditioning.
Can you put it on low, Kat?
Yeah.
Sandy? Thank you.
We want to put you on high.
That didn't change anything.
We have to put a stop to all these popular.
we may just have to turn it off and.
Okay, turn it off and see how far we can go with that.
We can get it though.
All right, is that better? Okay, much better. All right. I can hear. That's good. I won't have to shout quite as much either. Hey, Mary. Welcome. We are recording. We had to turn the air conditioning off because of the sound. There's a seat over here. Anyway, so I was just explaining that maybe these aren't all the same character. Maybe they're all different characters. But the first one that usually gets cited is the serpent in the Garden of Eden. And I talked about this in a previous class where the serpent is the only one who tells the truth. So to call in the Garden of Eden story, because God says, on the day that you eat from the apple in the center, from the tree in the center of the garden, on that day you shall die. Well, that doesn't happen. They do eat from, Adam and Eve do eat from the apple on that day, and they did not die on that day. They died hundreds of years later. So, but the serpent said, truthfully, that you will not die. Your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, or the gods, knowing good and evil. And that's in fact what happened. They ate the apple, and it opened their eyes, and they realized they were naked, and then everything else kind of cascaded from there. I don't think you can call the serpent a deceiver. He tells the truth. Now, what was he doing there, and why? And is this evidence of the existence of philosophical evil in a grander sense? Why would God create a universe with an evil being in it, unless it was doing his will? And in fact, in a lot of traditions, Islam, for example, you find out that the devil does God's will, and that the devil leads astray people because God wants them to be led astray. There's just kind of a fundamental problem with the idea of this philosophical evil existing in the world that is outside God's control. Either God is all-powerful, or he is not all-powerful. If he's all-powerful, then the devil does his will. Or, in this case, the serpent, which I'm suggesting is not the devil. Then Balaam's ass. I had to include Balaam's ass because It allows me to say ass several times. And, Balaam is an odd character because it's like this guy's not an Israelite. He's not a king. He's not, a domestic or foreign king. And he has this role in the Bible, and it's kind of this tale that is told for purposes that aren't immediately apparent when you read it for the first time. But Balaam was actually a well-known figure in the ancient Middle East, and there's an inscription completely outside the Bible about Balaam in northern Syria, I think. And this was discovered by archaeologists some decades ago, and they were able to translate it. And it refers to Balaam as a prophet and a magician, basically. And he is the first biblical character that we have, the earliest biblical character that we have evidence of existing outside the Bible. So every other character in the Bible, all we know about them comes from the Bible. But Balaam, we actually know something from this inscription from like the 7th century BCE that talks about him. So he was this magician, and the story goes that he was invited by an enemy king to come and curse the Israelites. And so he mounts up his donkey, and he's going down to curse the Israelites, closer to them. I guess he couldn't curse them from northern Syria. And too distant. I don't know how magic works, but apparently there's a distance element. And so he's going down there, and the donkey won't go. The donkey just turns off the road. And so he beats it. And I'm summarizing the story. I'm shortening it up here because he beats it 3 times. But like all good oral traditions, there's 3 of everything. And he beats the donkey 3 times. And finally, the donkey opens his mouth and says, "Why are you beating me? Can't you see there's an angel standing in the road?" So then Balaam can see the angel standing in the road, and he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, pardon me." But the weird thing, okay, that's not the weird thing. Now comes the weird part. The weird part is, instead of telling Balaam, "Don't go down and curse the Israelites," the angel says to Balaam, "Go down and do what I tell you to do." So he's basically turning Balaam into a double agent. Balaam was hired to do one thing, which was to curse the Israelites, and now he's being told by this angel to do something else. And the reason why it's included in this syllabus is because the angel is referred to as Ha-Satan, the opponent, the adversary. And so that's a use of the word Satan that doesn't have anything to do with philosophical evil. It's referring to an angel of the Lord. So the term Satan, can be used in a completely neutral, ethically neutral sense, and it doesn't have to be about philosophical evil. And you see the development in the Hebrew scriptures and then in the post-biblical era of this concept of Satan as being this philosophical evil. But that's not how the term is used in the Hebrew Bible. All right, so that's Balaam's ass. King David's census. This one always puzzled me as a kid. It's like, what's wrong with the census? We do a census in the United States every 10 years. Is that against God's will? I asked my parents, or I should have if I didn't. I was cheeky. I'm not sure I was that cheeky. And they were like, no, it was just because King David was told not to do that. Well, King David was expressly told to do that, but we have 2 different versions of the story. In 2 Samuel, the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, "Go count the people of Israel and Judah." And in the second version, which is Chronicles, Satan stood up against Israel and invited David to count the people of Israel. So which was it, God or Satan? Well, it depends on which book of the Bible you read. If the Bible speaks with one voice and the Bible is inspired in every word, and if this Bible is inerrant, how do you explain that?
They are not one.
No, there's not one voice. There's not one voice. There are people writing, human beings like us, writing propaganda, put it nicely, for a particular audience that they wanted to influence and to say, this is what you need to do. And this story about the census is a problem because David was supposed to rely on the Lord for support in battle, because the Lord God of hosts is God of armies. He is the one who brings victory. And so if he is the Lord of victory, you ought to trust him. You should not test the Lord your God, according to Deuteronomy. And because David was saying, well, I'm not sure I can win this war. Let me find out how many soldiers I have. Then he was not trusting in God. Another little point that 2 Samuel and 1 Chronicles disagree about how many soldiers he found in the census. There's wildly different numbers. So either there were two censuses, or somebody faked the numbers and they snuffed. I don't know. I mean, somebody can always explain the discrepancies in the Bible. They always have some excuse, but just a normal person's reading of this is like, oh, it's two different versions of the same story. All right, let's get to Job. Trials of Job. So Job has been taught a lot of different ways. Job has been seen as being the saintly figure who resists, who is tormented by all these terrible things happening to him, but remains faithful to God. And that's an example story of how we all ought to remain faithful to God no matter how many bad things happen to us. But I like to read Job completely differently, which is Job gets the best of God. Job is suffering from all this stuff, mostly happening to his kids, all of whom are killed, and all his flocks. And his friends come in and tell him it's all his own fault, which is a bit of a downer when you're already down. I mean, I hope that the pastoral care committee doesn't send you a card and say, this is all your fault. That would not be a good thing to do. And so, Job's feeling down, and God appears to him in a whirlwind. And God says, did you hang the morning star? Did you create everything? And Job is basically like, dude, you're going to do what you're going to do. You're much more powerful than I am. I acknowledge that. But he doesn't, at any point, Job never says, God, you have the moral high ground. Because God does not have the moral high ground in that story. Now, in the book, God, a Biography, the author writes about how if you read the Old Testament in the order of the books that the Jews have them in the Hebrew Old Testament, Job is the last book in which God speaks. After that, God remains silent. And I thought, that's a brilliant way to examine the character of God. After Job is like, dude, just because you're powerful doesn't mean you're right. God is like, I've got nothing to say after that. That was a fun point from that book. Okay.
Remember when we told the kids the story of Job?
No, tell me, remind me.
You were there. when
Yeah,
it
okay.
happened. And I just told the story, and the kids went, "That's mean." I thought God was nice.
Well, you remember when we did the Ten Commandments, they were only upset about the animals dying. I mean, the 10 plagues of Egypt.
Yeah.
They were really they didn't care that much about the firstborn sons, but except the one of them that was a firstborn son.
Right.
One of the things I touched on in the introduction to this class a few minutes ago was that there are a number of different names for Satan, or whatever you want to call it. One of them is Lucifer. So I thought I'd include this quotation from the book of Isaiah. It's on page 2 of the handout. Let there be light, and there was light. You are the light bringer. The carrier of light. Lucifer is just Latin for the carrier of light, and it's a translation from the Hebrew. And in Isaiah, the prophet writes, "How you are fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of dawn, how are you cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low." He's taunting the king of Babylon. This has nothing to do with Satan or anything else like that. But people said, oh, look, a fallen angel. That must be what this means. Because in the book of Enoch, which we discussed in a previous class, which is not in the Bible, there's a whole bunch about the fallen angels and why the angels fell, why they came to the earth, what they did when they came here. All of that stuff is in the book of Enoch. And I don't recommend you try to read the book of Enoch because it's a really tough read.
But you can see it on YouTube.
You can definitely see it on YouTube. And a lot of other places. Wikipedia has, I think, a good article about it. Here we just take this completely unrelated passage and shoehorn it into the idea, the framework that we already have, that there is a philosophical evil at work in the world, and that it is personified, and that we can find out about it from the Bible. And so that just gets shoehorned in there as well. And Luke kind of plays on that as I watch Satan fall from heaven like a flash of lightning. Not exactly the same thing, but later generations were able to we're going to tag Isaiah and we're going to tag Luke. I refer to this as kind of as the jigsaw puzzle, or maybe the mosaic way of interpreting the Bible. Is like, I'm going to take a piece from here, and I'm going to take a piece from here, and I'm going to take a piece from here, and I'm going to put them together, and it's going to mean something. It's just like the people who say, Harold Camping and people like that who say the world is going to end on February 23rd, 2027, at 9 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. And, they take a piece from each part of the Bible, and they can back up anything they say. I mean, they cite their sources. I mean, right? I mean, that's what you need to be published. You cite your sources. Okay. Anyway. Then I have a couple of quotes here from different parts of the Hebrew Bible talking about who's responsible for evil. For Samuel, an evil spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved within his house. Okay. Well, God can send evil spirits. If you're omnipotent, obviously you can send an evil spirit. And then 1 Kings, the Lord put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these our prophets. The Lord has decreed disaster for you. That's part of the passage where God decides that he's going to give false prophecies to a king he doesn't like, which is an odd thing for an omnipotent deity to do. Yeah, very odd. And then Isaiah 45:7, I form the light and create darkness, I make peace and create evil, I the Lord do all these things. Now, I put KJV after this one because it's the only Bible quote that I have today that is not from the New Revised Standard Updated Edition. Because I didn't like the New Revised Standard Updated Edition, and it is my prerogative to pick the version, the translation that I like, because it does what I want it to do, which is why anybody picks any translation of the Bible, it does what I want it to do, which is to say God is the source of evil, and he said so right there in the Bible. Now, the reason I don't like the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition is that it says, I make weal and I create woe. I mean, has anybody here used the word weal in a sentence?
What is wheel?
W-E-A-L. Good, benefits, prosperity. Okay, nobody, all right. How about woe? Anybody said woe unto me, woe is me? And if you said woe, other than in woe is me, keep your hand up. No, okay. You have? Okay.
Patty says, "Woe is me."
I mean, so the point of a translation is to try to communicate what the intent of the original authors were to the reader, right? And so if you're using words like weal and woe, which very educated group of people here don't even use in standard speech, then I don't think you're communicating. I don't know. I don't have a good idea about why they picked those particular words. I'd like to ask the translators that, because why do that? Why not follow the King James Version? The King James Version is perfectly clear. It's not no these, thous, none of this stuff. It's just clear as day. But they didn't like that version, I guess, for some reason. And so anyway, the King James Version here says God is the source of evil. So if you are one of those King James dropped down from heaven in a book format, perfect from its beginnings, people, then that's what you should believe. And there are people that think that the King James Version was not an updated version of the Bishop's translation that was sponsored by King James. They think that it really was divinely inspired in the original version, which is a problem because then it was edited several times. So which version of the King James version are you talking about? So anyway, people who don't know anything about Bible translation or the Bible often have very strong opinions about it. Okay, so then I have a paragraph here about the development of the concept of Satan. So in Iran, what we call now Iran, what was anciently called Iran, but then was called Persia for a long time, the Persians had a dualistic religion. They had a God of light that was the source of all good and who would judge your soul at the end of time. And they had an evil God who tried to deceive men and lead them astray and create problems for them. And that dualistic religion influenced the development of Judaism in the time period when the Persians ruled over Judah. It was Judah was a Persian province for hundreds of years. The scriptures, as we know them, came to be written and collated as we know them now, in the Persian and early Greek periods, the Macedonian periods. So the Greeks and the Persians had a huge influence over the development of the Bible. In fact, the oldest versions of the Bible we have are written in Greek. The Septuagint is written in Greek, and there's a miracle story about how it came to be written. But it basically was supposed to be a translation from the Hebrew. It differs from the Hebrew text that we have in a number of places. Now, the oldest Hebrew text that we have now is only 1,000 years old. So, do you trust the Septuagint from 2,300 years ago, 2,200 years ago, or do you trust this 1,000-year-old Hebrew version? Well, that's not really an answerable question.
Is that the Dead Sea Scrolls?
The Dead Sea Scrolls are helpful, but we don't have a complete version of any of the books of the Bible. We have passages, and often they have different versions, different readings. So we know that the books of the Bible.
There must have been some interesting conversations back then too.
Well, the thing is, this idea that the Bible, the books of the Bible are holy writ and should never be altered, it has never really been in practice, because medieval monks would write something in the margin, and the person copying that book of the Bible would copy the marginal comment into the text of the Bible. And so there's never been this concept of you can't take away a word or put a word in. That has been honored in the breach, if at all. Are people getting too hot? Do we want to turn the air conditioning back on, or would we rather have the heat than the noise?
It's okay.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. So that's a capsule summary of how we got where we are from the end of the biblical books, the time period that the biblical books are covering, to say the time that the New Testament's being written. And so there's three different versions of Jesus' temptation by Satan. And one is he's fasting in the desert for 40 days, and Satan says, you are the Son of God, you can turn these rocks into bread. And that's kind of evoking, I think it's in Psalms where it says, would a father give a stone to a son who asks for bread? So there's echoes, poetic echoes in this thing. And Jesus said, man does not live by bread alone. And so that was his reply to Satan, saying, no, I'm not going to do a magic trick for you today. And then the second one, or the third one, depending on which gospel you're in, is I've taken you up to the top of the temple. You can throw yourself off the roof because the angels of God will hold you up. And so Jesus answers, you will not tempt the Lord your God, which is a quotation from Deuteronomy. And then the third or the second, depending on which one you're in, which gospel you're in, is you see all these lands on the earth, I will make you Lord of all of them if you just bow down to me. And he says, get thee behind me. The odd thing about this is there's an apparent unwritten assumption here that Satan has dominion over all the lands of the earth, that Satan couldn't offer to give rulership over the lands of the earth to Jesus if he didn't already have ownership of them. But I think that kind of misses the point. If he's the deceiver, he could promise anything at all, He could promise I won't cut Medicaid, and
Way to go.
all right. So, the parables of Jesus, I'll make my position well known. I believe Jesus actually existed. I believe he had a lot of interesting things to say, and that's what caused people to remember them for decades until they were written down. Now, these stories changed in transmission. They were used for different purposes at the time that they were retold, and then when they were written down, that was for a different purpose as well. But, some of his sayings are catchy enough that you can kind of detect a person behind it. It's like in 100 years from now, if nobody had written down any of Yogi Berra's sayings, and there was only oral tradition about what Yogi Berra said, and you heard a Yogi Berraism that you never heard before, if you come to a fork in the road, take it. Nobody goes there anymore because it's too crowded. You would instantly recognize that was Yogi Berra's voice. And the same thing is true for Jesus. He has some amazing stories.
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare would be another example, yeah. If you didn't know where something came from, and in fact, if you ever forget where something came from when you're quoting it, just say it was Shakespeare. People will not double check. They will not double check. A quick side story. There was a lawyer in a small southern town who was arguing a case, and in his closing argument, he wanted to quote Shakespeare. Then he wondered if the jury would have ever read any Shakespeare, so he attributed it to the Bible. And he wins his case, and like the next morning, the opposing attorney calls him up and says, I have read my Bible from cover to cover overnight. I didn't get a wink of sleep. Where did you find it? People don't know what's in the Bible. They just have no idea. You can make up anything. All right, so Matthew, the Gospel according to Matthew, the Gospel attributed to Matthew, is the source of most of our sayings about Satan in the Gospels. And there are parallel versions in Luke and Mark, but Matthew has the most of them. And so at one point, the Pharisees, who are a group of religiously observant Jews, who feel that even though they are not priests, they ought to observe the priestly law. That's what made them Pharisees. Said to Jesus, you are casting out devils in the name of the head devil, Beelzebul, Lord of the Flies, which is a joke name based on Beelzebub, something else that is Lord of the land or something like that. So it's already a made-up name. But Jesus had ESP. He knew what they were thinking. And he said, every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and no city or house divided against itself will stand. And then he's got another saying there that the gospel writer has jammed into this location because it serves his rhetorical purposes. How can one enter a strong man's house and plunder his property without first tying up the strong man? Then indeed the house can be plundered. So I don't know if Jesus is recommending breaking and entering and grievous bodily harm, but he's basically saying, no, I can't possibly be throwing out devils in the name of the devil because the devil wouldn't want that to happen. That would be a house divided. Which kind of puts a different spin on Abraham Lincoln's use of that phrase, doesn't it? What? If you know the context, and I'm sure Abe Lincoln did know the context, what was he saying about, I don't know, interesting thought. And then Matthew throws in a third saying that has nothing to do with this. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. We have no idea what the original context of that saying was. The problem with the Gospels is they took things that people said, oh, Jesus said this. All right, the Gospel writer's like, okay, I got to fit this in somewhere. And so he's fitting in somewhere where he can use that phrase as kind of rhetorical support for the point that he's trying to make there. And then I also give you just quick references to some other parables mentioning Satan. Or maybe it's not Satan. The evil one, is that Satan? Why not just say Satan if it's the evil one? The devil and his angels, the devil. So we see throughout here that we have a bunch of different characters referred to as different things. Are they all the same character? That's a theological decision that people have made. And then, of course, we can't get out of talking about Satan without talking about the book of Revelation. I did a sermon on the book of Revelation one time. And the best part for me was the kids' story, the story for all ages. Because I was like, who likes comic books? Oh, yeah. Who likes horror stories? Oh, yeah, we like horror stories. Who likes, war stories? Oh, yeah, we all like war stories. That's what the book of Revelation is. It's a revenge fantasy by downtrodden people about how they're going to get and destroy the Roman Empire. If you want to join the Judean People's Front, you really have to hate the Romans. That's the whole point of the book. But it's been wildly misinterpreted over the centuries, often in very anti-Semitic ways to justify attacks against Jewish people. And right there in the first bullet point, the author supposedly John of Patmos, is saying that is one of the nearby synagogues is a synagogue of Satan. Doesn't explain why. But that synagogue of Satan phrase you will hear from anti-Semites all the time because they want to broaden that to all Jews and say that they are all Satan worshipers. And so that's been a very dangerous phrase in the history of Christianity. He also warns that Satan lives among the congregation of Pergamum and has his throne there. Apparently this is a reference to a big enthroned statue of Zeus, Jupiter, that was in Pergamum. That's the best that the scholars can figure out. And then he tells the comic book slash horror story slash war story about the great red dragon. And 7 heads, not 6, 7 heads. 10 horns, 7 crowns, and a massive tail. The devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. So he's conflating all of these different characters together to say this is what's going to happen in the end times, which are coming real soon. And then there's the mark of the beast. So the mark of the beast is often associated with Satan, but not even John of Patmos is saying that this is also Satan. He's actually talking about Nero, the Emperor Nero, who was dead at the point that John of Patmos was writing the book. But there was a rumor that he was coming back, that he had merely gone off to some foreign country and was going to come back and rule again. And we know this from extra biblical sources because they talked about how people were afraid Nero was coming back. He was that bad. And that is, you can read it yourself, but basically there was a brand on the hand or on the forehead where if you didn't have that, you were not able to buy or sell. And so people have tried to connect this with barcodes, tried to connect it with the computer chips that Elon has implanted in all of our heads. They've tried to connect it with any number of things because it's a perennial.
That was Moderna.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that's right. It was the Moderna vaccine. That's right. Yeah, I mean, people will grasp at anything because they think that they are living in the most important time. Because I'm alive now. That's why it's the most important time. Anyway. So then, later in the book, Satan is bound with a chain, hurled with the abyss for 1,000 years. I think that's where the millennium comes from. The millenarians think that there's going to be, this end times tribulation. I talked about this in my Easter sermon. That that's the kind of the end of the story. Is the 17-book deal or is it 27-book deal for retelling the Book of Revelation, the Left Behind series. It's still making money. And then Gog and Magog, this is a reference to the book of Ezekiel, which we don't need to get into. And then, the good things happen because the devil was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur where the beast and the false prophet were, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Well, that's cheery. I mean, infinite punishment for finite sins.
Yeah.
How is that justice? All right. Well, I just kind of speed ran through that, and it's only half past. Go
I
ahead.
have a question. You seem to be very erudite on all of this.
Oh,
I want to ask.
I'll give you $20 later.
What I want to know is, why did God create, as the Bible said, why did he create something to require a sacrifice for forgiveness of?
Right. Why would a good God create something that would then require sacrifice to
That we'd all have to accept
that
as
we would
the
all have to
sacrifice.
accept? Right.
What?
Once you pose the question, it answers itself. That is not a logical view of the world.
No.
So, I mean, how do you get around that? I mean, there are any number of ways to get around that, but I think they all require some level of cognitive dissonance that people are engaged in, that they are going to say, well, you can't question certain things, because questioning is bad, and we are the sheep and he is the shepherd, and therefore we ought to accept what he says, and that's just a recipe for abuse. And
Well, yeah, and it also goes back to the Adam and Eve story
Yeah.
where Cain and Abel, one of them sacrifice was okay, but the other one wasn't?
Yeah, Cain and Abel, right. Cain was the grower of grain, and Abel was the keeper of animals, and the animal sacrifices were acceptable to the Lord, and the grain sacrifices were not, which is really weird because in the Temple of Jerusalem, from what we know about it, there were sacrifices of both grain and of animals. Oh, by the way, thank you for prompting my
Why can't the farmers and the ranchers be friends?
yes, why can't the farmers and the ranchers be friends? There is a temple outside Jerusalem that was discovered by archaeologists, and they found plant material that had been burned on the altar, and they tested the DNA of the plant material that was on there. Anybody want to guess what it was?
Great. Marijuana?
Marijuana.
Yeah, that's right.
I read my Bible.
Well,
So they were smoking it back
they were
then.
smoking. The priests were high.
Yeah, Okay.
So,
that makes sense.
high priests. Yes, thank you.
But there's so many things like that, it's like,
Well, so why? And once you get to that question, then the next question is why would you read the Bible, and what good can it have for us today? And I think that's a different answer for everybody. For me, it is about understanding our faith tradition and the faith tradition of most of the people in this country and most people around the world, and trying to understand where they're coming from. It's just like any other field of study. You gain a lot from learning what other people think, and plus there's a fair amount of good in the Bible. I mean, Thomas Jefferson took scissors to the New Testament and cut out all the miracles, cut out all of the stuff about supernatural stuff, and just left the sayings, and created his own sayings gospel before we even knew there was a thing such as the sayings gospel, before we found the gospel according to Thomas in Egypt. And so he created his own sayings gospel because he's considered it to be the most sublime moral teachings the world had ever seen. So there's that.
there's also, it's in literature.
It is all through
Understanding
literature.
the literature,
Right.
quotes and so forth.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you don't understand it, you're not really. It's like cultural literacy. Cultural literacy was a thing a couple of decades ago, maybe 4 or 5 decades ago by now. And there were books that were put out. It's like here's the things you ought to know, the things that you didn't learn in school, and so that you can reference. You can see the reference to Shakespeare. You can see the references to the Bible. You can see the references to Greek myths. Yeah. All that stuff. And so, to the extent that we could all read a book together, that's part of the problem. People don't read books. But if we could all read the same book and have a frame of reference, then, and there were books like that in like the 1800s for young British men who were like, didn't do the reading in school, and so they didn't know who Achilles was, and why would somebody reference Achilles, and this sort of thing. So there's some history behind that idea that we want to have a shared cultural framework.
You mean the Nutshell series for going to Oxford?
Oxford Nutshell, that would be a great thing. I would definitely sign up for that.
Martin,
Yes, ma'am.
on the first quote, the serpent in the Garden of Eden,
Yes.
where, next last line, where you say, and you will be like God, friends of the gods, friends.
Oh, yeah.
Did you put the parentheses thing in there because we studied that last time?
No, that's
Or does it appear that way?
It's a footnote. It's in a footnote in the Revised Standard, New Revised Standard Version, updated edition, because the word is Elohim, which is a plural in form. It can be used either as a singular or a plural. They've decided to go with the singular in the main text and put the plural in the footnote. But it's an equally valid reading to say you will be like the gods, or the divine ones, if you want to avoid the G word. And so, yeah, that is not me making an editorialization. That is actually from the Hebrew. Charlie.
We blame the serpent. Were there other cultural stories where some other critter gets the blame?
Not in the ancient Judaism or the ancient Near East. Serpents tend to be the bad guys. Like Tiamat, the goddess of the ocean, is defeated by Baal, or sometimes other deities, who was the force of chaos. And this great king defeats the seven-headed serpent, which is where the seven-headed dragon comes from in Revelation. And so we know from ancient West Asian folklore that there was this concept of the serpent as being the ultimate bad guy.
How
But
did,
the Egyptians honored the cobra, right?
The Egyptians honored the cobra as one of the symbols of their kingdom, either southern or northern kingdom, I don't remember which.
how did, I'm sorry, Charlie, are you
Sure.
done?
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't God say to the serpent in the garden, because of what you did, apparently the serpent had legs,
Yeah,
and he said, now you're gonna crawl on your belly, and actually, the skeleton of the snake has the leftover.
vestigial legs.
Yes.
Vestigial legs.
It does.
There are snakes with legs that are somewhat vestigial, that are external legs, and then there are non-snake creatures with no legs. So the biology is a little mixed up. Clarence Darrow pointed that out in the Scopes monkey trial. He put William Jennings Bryan on the witness stand and asked him, how did the snake get around before that? And Jeff Bryan had no answer for that.
Yeah,
But that's kind of a famous,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Is
Sounds
that
like
an inherent-
directed evolution if I ever heard it.
Yeah.
Is that an inherent the wind?
I haven't seen the movie, so I
I-
don't know.
I saw the play, and I don't think it was, but
Okay.
that's
It's in
interesting.
the nutshell.
It's in the nutshell, that's right. This is the nutshell.
That's interesting. yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
How does Dana Carvey's church lady starting their life in
David Carter's church like, isn't that convenient?
Isn't that special?
Yes.
could it be Satan?
Yeah, that's right. It's an all-purpose excuse, right? If anything bad happens, if anything goes wrong that Satan did. I was meaning to look on YouTube for a clip of Flip Wilson saying the devil made me do it. I forgot to do that. Anybody remember Flip Wilson? All right. Yes. Okay. Devil made me do it.
I gotta say that this past week, I'll shut up. This past week, I listen to Christian stations occasionally just to know what they're up to.
Uh-huh.
And this was one in which they were just extolling Trump for his big bad, because for getting rid of abortion and saving babies.
Right.
But, of course, they didn't say anything about the millions of babies dying all over the world because we pulled back our
USAID.
And once the babies are here, there's no money to take care of them.
Oh, you're trying to get me going, aren't you?
Well, I'm just saying, I'm just saying, listening to it, I was going, you guys are,
So yeah, any kind of Christian apologetics. Apologetics is the science or art of explaining the doctrine of the church or the Bible scriptures to people in a way that makes them feel like it's okay to keep on doing what they've been
keep
doing.
doing what they're doing.
One of the things that happened as a result of the COVID pandemic was that people stopped going to church. And at the time, when a lot of churches were shut down by governor's orders, the Christians, particularly the right-wing Christians, were all like, no, you can't do that, people won't come back. They were right. The people did not come back because they started thinking, well, I've got an extra morning free in my week. How did I not know this beforehand? And so, they've got to bring those people back in, which is a lot harder than keeping them from week to week. So I was watching a video this morning on TikTok about how, hey, MAGA people, did you know that we spend $4 billion a year in aid to Israel? Did you know that Israel has free abortion on demand?
Wow.
They wouldn't have free abortion on demand if we weren't paying for it with U.S. tax dollars. Charlie?
Wow.
Is there just one Satan, like there's just one God?
Is there one Satan just like there's one God? That's a great question because, that would be the kind of dualistic Manichaean idea. Manichae was a prophet who said that there are two gods, one good and one evil, and, you have to support the good one because he needs your help. And which is very contrary to Christian tradition because the Christian God doesn't need your help. He doesn't need your worship. He doesn't need anything. He's completely independent and self-sustaining, doesn't need anything from you. But in Manichaeism or in certain Persian religions, yeah, there was the opposition of God and Satan. There's really no way to answer that question. There's a bunch of traditions about the devil and why there are multiple devils. It comes from a Greek and Latin word that means the deceiver. And so it's used in various contexts to kind of create this idea of that's bad, and so you shouldn't do that, and you have to personify the evil. And so if you're going to personify the evil, then one person is much more convenient than there's a committee. The committee of the serpent, the red dragon, the evil one, the devil, Satan. It's like they meet on alternate Thursdays at 7 p.m. The serpent is the parliamentarian because he's the only one who can tell the truth.
Have you all seen the Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean skit where he plays the devil?
Rowan Atkinson's devil skit?
Uh-huh.
No.
Oh my God, you guys.
Bedazzled,
It's on YouTube.
the original Bedazzled has a great Satan because he grants wishes and they always turn out wrong. It's still like Mr. Faust except a comedy. Yeah, the original Bedazzled, very funny movie. But yeah, it's been a stock character since the Middle Ages. I've read that in a lot of early Middle Ages stories or plays, the devil was a comic relief character. He would come on, he'd be bumbling around, and people, the everyman character would recognize that he was the devil and beat him with a stick or whatever, make medieval people laugh. And so, it's been a character who serves the purposes of the storyteller. Whatever the storyteller needs Satan to be is what Satan is for the purposes of that story. All right. Any other questions? Yeah, Charlie's got another one. Charlie, go ahead.
Circles of hell.
Circles of hell.
Is the Satan at the center of the circles, and his influence diminishes as you go further away?
Satan is at the center of the circles of hell. All of that stuff, I'm not sure where Dante got that from, but it's in the Divine Comedy, and he tells that story. And I don't really know enough about Dante to say what his rhetorical purposes were in that story, whether it was trying to be inspirational or just entertaining, mixture of both. But, it does seem like Satan is the CEO of hell, and, he has his underlings, his ranks, his bureaucracy, his bureaucrats underneath him, just like God has his bureaucrats. He's got Michael, who's the warlord, and he's got Gabriel, who's the announcer, and he's got all of these other angels underneath him, and thrones and powers and principalities. And so Satan has all of his fallen angels that are part of his imperial bureaucracy. It was like the people writing the stories only had one concept of power, and that it was top down. And so, I kind of like the idea of the satanic committee, though. I'm going to use that.
I think Shakespeare wrote about it.
Yeah. Okay. Shakespeare wrote about it. Probably.
Dante left his weed on the altar?
Dante left his weed on the altar. That's definitely true. I'm sure somebody named Dante has left weed on the altar. A lot of people named Dante.